Okay, greetings everyone. Welcome to part 7 of the book study, The Body Keeps the Score, Brain, Mind, and Body and the Healing of Trauma by Bessel Van Der Kolk, MD. Very unfortunate situation we are learning about this trauma and its pervasiveness throughout life and throughout people activity in general. Just seems to be a something that is deeply embedded in society, and I would imagine this is something that greatly affects non-white people way more than white people, although no one is free from the trauma that racism, white supremacy creates. Lots of points I want to make. In the beginning, when they're talking about the questions that they were asking their patients, like how did your parents solve their disagreements? Who did they feel? Was there anybody who felt safe with growing up? All of these questions weren't for the majority of the answers. It seems like the children were not able to answer the questions with a yeah, I grew up in a safe environment, or yeah, my parents were able to solve their problems constructively. More times than not, it was like, did you grow up, did you feel safe with anybody in your home? And they would answer nobody. Or how did your parents solve their arguments? Oh, by fighting or shouting. So all of these, they call them ACE, adverse childhood experiences. All of these, I believe, to be the reason to why the world is in the shape it's in. We are in a system that greatly traumatizes everyone in various degrees. Really interesting to hear about all this rape and incest going on, but I've heard that from victims being sexually abused by people and their family members, people in their family. And for a long time, I didn't even like equate that with incest. But yes, if a family member is sexually abusing a person, that is a form of incest. And it seems that white people have made this sick, incorrect behavior very common, and they have trained victims of racism and white supremacy to also participate in this sick behavior. I'm just reminded of this part where it states on 157, how were the kids kept in line? By talking, scolding, spanking, locking you up? How did your parents solve their disagreements? By then, the floodgates had usually opened, and many patients were volunteering detailed information about their childhoods. One woman had witnessed her little sister being raped. Another told us she had her first sexual experience at 8 with her grandfather. I even think it's very suspicious to even use that kind of language, calling it a first sexual experience at the age of 8. I would have said a patient said that she was raped at the age of 8 by her grandfather. Maybe this is a way that this author is practicing racism and white supremacy, but not describing these things as, not describing these things in the correct manner. And it's definitely not just the rape that creates trauma. It's just the whole reality of how the system trains people to be like quite careless, or they have been so traumatized that they grow up to be careless individuals who have babies and just don't have any knowledge of how to take care of a baby, of a child. And I'm reminded at this part on the same page, another had been 9 when she grabbed and steadied the car's steering wheel because her drunken mother was swerving down a 4-lane highway during rush hour. I can't imagine being in a victim unit where I'm having to steer a car at the age of 9 because my attempting parents are too drunk to not kill us on the road. But this is the reality that racism and white supremacy has created. We have 24/7 on the globe. We have children in really, really incorrect situations that they should not be in. The most recent race soldier lynching, I don't know her name, but the Black female who was shot by the race soldier, she was a victim as well, being in and out of the foster care system, which I am sure contributed to her poor emotional regulations to create that whole situation where she's attempting to harm another victim with a knife, giving a race soldier an avenue to justifiable homicide. So it's really it's not just in this book. This stuff is happening 24/7, and the people who are to blame the most will always be the white people who practice white supremacy, the white people who allow and maintain the system and who do absolutely nothing to correct the system and produce justice. And I thought this part was really interesting as well, where it said the data had convinced him that unless you understand the language of trauma and abuse, you cannot really understand BPD, bipolar disorder, bipolar personality disorder. So I say that's like kind of the same thing about racism and white supremacy. If you really don't understand racism and white supremacy, what it is, how it works, it'll be quite hard for folks to understand exactly what this system does to white and non-white people, like how it makes us just total monsters, tragic monsters, non-white people being the tragic monsters who like are powerless in this situation and have very, very few avenues to get the help that they need. And white people are just monsters because they have all the power, but choose to allow the system to continue and choose to allow even their children to be sexually abused, to be put in really incorrect situations. It's just really incorrect. It's just really it's hard to not. I'm not even getting angry over it reading this. I just understand that this is really unfortunate, and it will continue happening. The police killings, the child abuse, the child neglect, until we get an effective numbers of non-white people actually being serious about solving the problem, actually being serious about changing their behaviors, because white people have proven. I think the evidence shows that they are not interested in changing their behavior. They want to continue mistreating non-white people for fun. This book is another example of how white people do not care about children, because a lot of these victims in this book, not victims of racism, but just victims of like abuse and rape, these are white people. These are white children. At least some of them are. And I have more, but I'll see if anyone has things to share.
Can I come in?
Please do.
Yeah, earlier this week I was remaking this diagram that Dr. Walton has in the ISIS papers. She calls it, it's on like the third page of the preface, dynamic causation of Black teen pregnancy, teen impregnation, and other dependency deprivation syndromes. And I realized that what he's speaking about here, I mean, we can make the connection through the excessive environmental stress that racism causes 24/7. It does not provide, there's inappropriate and inadequate social system supports for the family. And then, and then therefore you will have a failed family function. And the children will not get the adequate emotional support, inadequate mothering and fathering. You just put the parents through enough stress, and you put them and their grandparents and their great grandparents through enough stress, and it keeps passing down the line. One thing that was interesting of what he said is that we are treating illnesses, we're treating symptoms of something that happened 50 years ago. So that would imply he's talking about, you're not just treating a child, you're treating the parent. And for Black people, I know that is grandparents, great grandparents. How many of our grandparents or great grandparents may not have had adequate mothering, or, just coming out of slavery, how much social system, how much environmental stress is placed on us. I can think back to my own family and think about my own grandparents and challenges that they felt. Not much unlike what we have now, but yeah. So I see a connection between white supremacy, like if white people who are benefiting from the system having, let's say they have 25% of children that are undergoing trauma, how much more is the percentage for Black people, especially as the family falls apart and is unable to provide the support for the children? Yeah, I think this is useful. And the other comment I'd like to make is the importance of a definition. The author spoke about how disappointed he was that the definition, the diagnosis, which is essentially a definition, their diagnosis of the specific kind of trauma related to childhood mistreatment that it was not accepted into the diagnosis manual. Because of that, therapists and others could not treat people because they would not know what to look for. They would not know that what they're looking at. It's so important to have a definition. So once again, that helps with that fits in with our counter-racist work, where we use words and definitions carefully. Yeah. That's all for me.
Thank you. Agreed. Definitions are insanely important, just as important as the words we use to communicate. We have often been trained to speak to one another using deceit and using confusion, and that will not get us where we need to be, which is on the path to producing justice. Anyone else have anything to share?
Yeah, I want to share. Ms. Nebula, do you want to go first?
That's okay. You can go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, I wanted to share something that I thought was suspicious about the writing. There's a bit where he's talking about the people who are abused, how they have to get help by like social workers and all these agencies, and it's without saying much, I'm suspecting that these children that are, for the most part, being abused are non-white children, and I suspect that the writer is somewhat of a, not somewhat, is a racist suspect, but nonetheless, some of the information is valid, such as victims becoming, like the moment they become traumatized, that becomes a reoccurring moment in their life, and that could lead to them being stuck in that moment, which in reality could mean being stuck in the past and not being able to move forward and create or pave a constructive routine in their lives. And the whole child rearing, how children are expected to be disciplined through some form of violence or extreme control, and even in schools and inflict that type of pattern. I feel like a racist white supremacist society demands control be an element in all aspects of life, because it is one of the driving forces of the European asili. So much like 0526 says, like, this stuff is to be expected, and the tragedy of grandparents abusing their grandchildren, and just how deep the trauma goes, because the act of rape is a European act, and it is something that has been put inside non-white people. It's like a nuclear bomb that's been given to non-white people, from them to go out and hurt their bloodline, to hurt their DNA, and to harm their genetic offsprings. It's really tragic, but to be expected under the context of racism, white supremacy.
Thank you, sir. That reminds me on this part, on 158, where it states, when children are pervasively filled with rage, it is due to rejection or harsh treatment. When children experience intense inner conflicts regarding their angry feeling, this is likely because expressing them may be forbidden or even dangerous. And this is quite true for victims of racism who find themselves growing up in a so-called hood. Though places like the hoods, the ghettos, South Central, you are really trained there to not be truthful with your emotions and with your feelings. You are really taught to regulate your emotions in a way that if you are feeling upset, want to cry, maybe you're trained not to do that. You're trained to see anger as some avenue to manhood. Like when you're angry, you gotta like pop off at somebody or show some sort of aggression towards another person to that is what the kind of training that is received over there. And this sort of reality is why it's just so common for non-white people to have absolutely no problem at all, like slaying each other, doing drive-bys to one another. It's because we're dealing with a group of people who were taught to be dishonest with themselves, who were taught to bury the majority of their constructive emotions, and then they just become bottles of misery, bottles of anger, misery, and hostility. And this eventually becomes the rolling 60s, pulling up on the Parus and killing each other. And for what? It's not producing justice, and it's just causing more harm amongst other non-white people. So if children are better reared, better protected, especially non-white children, then we could avoid a lot of this sort of behavior. But I'm reminded of the ISIS papers, Black child parents, when we have babies attempting to raise babies, I guess this sort of programming is sophisticatedly planned by racist men and racist women. So I believe that they know that a baby having baby is probably going to make create the situations I just mentioned, like the gang violence, the death and destruction amongst non-white people. I suspect that they're very much aware that their programming will lead to what I just said, which is why it's up to non-white people to really get an understanding of the trauma that race and white supremacy produces and how we can counter that trauma. And it can literally be as simple as just not yelling at your offspring, not cursing at them, helping them to be truthful with their emotions and helping them to pinpoint what they're feeling. But you tell this to the average non-white Black person, victim of racism and white supremacy, they'll look at you crazy, because it is crazy to truly care about oneself and other non-white people in a system of racism. We are supposed to hate one another. We are supposed to withhold this sort of information so we could keep the system of racism and white supremacy afloat, and so we could keep our mistreatment in rotation. So it literally is just the 10 stops. Stop name calling, stop cursing, stop fighting with one another. That could go a long way into countering all of this trauma that the system produces, which is why a code is so important, especially a code that non-white people can follow. And I'm also, the text says on 159, does inflicting harm on oneself begin as a desperate attempt to gain some sense of control? I think the non-white brain computer realizes that in terms of power or control, we are not the wielders of that. We carry no power nor the ability to control the majority of the things that happen to us. So maybe driving around and choosing a Black person to slaughter is a way of getting a sense of power. Maybe a big homie telling a little homie what to do what to say is a form of power, even though what's being said to do and say is very, very incorrect. So it's just like the body and mind has its own way of solving problems, and whether it's through self-harm or harming people who look like you, it's probably not going to be constructive if you are not intentional with one's behavior. And I think that's what we've been trained really well on, how not to be intentional with what we're doing. When we are trained really well not to be intentional with our usage of time and energy, which is why I still see grown freaking Black females putting on these like eyelashes, and I'm like, someone had reported to me about what they had saw at a party, and then she used to the terminology that like Black females are just like sex babies, and that they're programmed to just literally want to look cute, and even that if looking cute is looking really silly with giant freaking eyelashes and silly weaves and all that nonsense, that seems to be in the brain computer of most non-white people, wanting to look cute and desired, I suppose. And then this is because that's how we've been trained. We haven't been trained to think about things that can have a constructive value. There's no constructive value in looking cute. There's no constructive value in going out and buying cosmetics to prep oneself up or whatever, to make yourself look prettier. This is all nonsense. We have literally been trained to be a people who are serious about nonsense and silly about serious things, like understanding their behavior. And yeah, it's just really, really tragic. And also, and those same people that I mentioned, the same victims of racial white supremacy, they are also the ones who spend a lot of their time gossiping and name calling each other, even if it's for fun. There's no constructive value in name calling one another just for fun. And we could blame the white people who have made shows like Euphoria, made shows like the Bad Girls of Bad Girls Club, because all this programming is very, very, very powerful. The area of entertainment is such a powerful force of making people be really, really just pitiful. Like they literally strive to be a either a Black male yelling and fussing with other Black males, or a Black female yelling and fussing with other Black females for fun. And all of this is like very the cycle of trauma that we have been born into, because I don't see that as just simple mistreatment. That is a form of trauma, and these people are very, very traumatized, I would suspect. I'm assuming. The book states 160, they go from one extreme to the other. They have trouble staying on task, and they continually lash out against themselves and others. To some degree, their problems do overlap with those of combat soldiers, but they have also very different in that their childhood trauma has prevented them from developing some of the mental capacities that adult soldiers possessed before their trauma occurred. So many non-white people, non-white victims of racism, are traumatized at a very, very early age, whether that's from a parent yelling at them or spanking them, or from something more severe like being raped by a family member, or are being made to play abusive games with family members. So when this happens, kind of similar to the Black child parents, that your brain becomes somewhat retarded in a sense where it will kind of stay the same. You won't really grow that much. And perhaps this can be an explanation to why victims of racism spend their entire lives in a cycle of doing not much of anything besides surviving and loitering about. I do suspect this is why, because the majority of us are very, very traumatized. And even I have an issue with some of these, like in my more confused days, even now, having trouble staying on task, lashing out against themselves and others, something I'm very familiar with. But as I began to understand why and how, I've been able to counter it. But a lot of non-white people will not get that that opportunity, because the brain trashing, the mistreatment from white supremacy racism is just such a motivating force that we will have way more unaware slaves being born into the system of white supremacy than attempting counter racists being born into the system, because you can only be what your attempted parents instill in you. And a lot of victims of racism are still and will continue, I suspect, to instill their offspring with nonsense. I really hope it doesn't take some sort of purge scenario, which is already going on, but the purge scenario where white people start just killing non-white people, Black people in particular, just start killing them. I hope it doesn't take something like that for non-white people to get serious about this race problem that we're all experiencing. I hope it doesn't take that for the majority of them to like start teaching their kids about the system of race and white supremacy, and to start studying themselves about the system and how to eliminate it. But that may be what it takes. It may take some more overt example of white supremacy, because it seems that these police, these race soldier killings is not enough to get Black people to get as serious as they need to be. Especially in my victim unit, I'm still seeing the stupid looking eyelashes, and I'm still seeing the Black males in my victim unit just attempting to have fresh clothes, fresh gear, and going out and having fun at parties and clubs still. So really, really tragic, really unfortunate, and very hard to not be upset 24/7 over what I am witnessing, experiencing. But every victim of racism is a veteran and also a child at the same time. So this behavior, if you understand racism, white supremacy, what it is and how it works, should no longer surprise any of us, as far as I'm concerned. Any comments?
Yeah,
I wanted. Oh, never mind. Go. No, yeah.
I actually wanted to speak from before, because my laptop kept coming out. I wanted to share something about how the trauma does definitely get trapped in the body, and how it is a form of like PTSD, like similar to, well, I wouldn't know how it feels to get war flashbacks, but I wanted to just share something that I had used to help me, for anybody who's listening who may have experienced it and still kind of gets it. because it's something that I started dealing with mainly around 16. The flashbacks of it is something I had experienced at 2 years old, and it kind of left me, and then it just kind of plays back literally like a memory. And as it's like a very early memory, it just really caught me out at weird times, and it would just like, when it catches you off guard and I'm like in bed, or if like I'm in a particular place, I just go quiet and just deal with it personally. And because it's a family member, you get exposed to it several times when the name is brought up, or in light conversation, or a family member just mentions like something for them, or their adoration for them or something, and you just kind of go into it. But it kind of turns you into you think of others before you think of yourself for that reason, because you instantly become a protector of this person, and it kind of carries you for other people who you do actually care about, let alone somebody who you're protecting for the reason that it's shameful for them and for yourself. But the way that I dealt with the flashbacks, or as it will come to me, as I started learning more through my education of psychology, luckily, I studied like positive psychology, and it has so many different types of interventions, just about like to just become a grateful person in general, like as they're seeing it as this newfound information at the time. But really and truly, these practices were things that we do within ourselves, was very African centered in terms of recalling your day and remembering the positive things to be grateful for. So there was one in terms of replacing the negative memory with a good memory. And because I didn't have any good memories of when I'm 2, except for like little moments of like laughter, it wasn't enough for that experience. So I had to like, as it would, if it flashback to me, I basically create like a safe space for myself to think about it, but allow my older self now to interject in for my younger self. And as they didn't have a protector, I would literally said, I apologize for what you experienced. It's not your fault that you experienced this. What happened to you is not your fault, and you don't have to protect them, and I'm going to protect you. And then in my mind, that I like literally beat up the person who was abusing, like push them away from the child via me, through just imaginative work. But it really helps. And like I asked the little child, that, what do you want to do now? And they're like, I want ice cream. And then just imagine like Dragon Ball Z just flying out the window, just like turning it into something else. But doing that a lot of the times, like consistently attacking that thought as it would flash back to me with that kind of reinforcement, has now allowed it to be something that allows me to talk to people, like especially in my place of work, who express vulnerable behaviors from molestation. So it's, yeah, I just wanted to share that. And I do think that it needs a different diagnosis, because it affects, like, I think right now it's scattered in the spectrum in terms of borderline personality disorder, dissociative behavior. I think it's like all of these things that don't know how to like categorize some of these forms of traumas, because if addressing that would have to address how these traumas got into the body in the first place down the line, and it would have to address racism, white supremacy. So it's going to always be labeled in these little boxes, so they can have them very massive book that they decide is the quotation. But the point I'm trying to make is that it's always going to be this loop of information. But I think that it's a combination of things, and the way that it expresses out in your behavior, body language, sociability, and yeah, that's all I want to share about that for now.
Thank you. Reminds me of something Dr. Welsing says when you're trying to deal with the many incorrect effects of racism, white supremacy. Is one thing a person can do is just hug themselves and say, yeah, it's really interesting that you have been programmed or treated that way due to the system of racism and white supremacy. But but just to hug yourself and say that, and then just talk to yourself, a little self-soothing exercise. I believe that can be called. Ms. Cruz, did you want to share something? Or?
Yes, I'm sorry. I just got out of the school. I wanted to say, you know how he was asking questions to the kids, and as far as like arguments or them seeing how their parents solve issues or interactions with each other. I feel like as much as the abuse that they have seen or the trauma that they have discovered, I feel like kids that don't see their parents argue have issues as well, meaning I grew up where I never really see my parents argue at all. But because of that, I feel like me and my siblings, when it comes to solving problems and issues or getting into it with people, we don't know how to interact, and then we don't know how to interact with each other because we never seen that. So it makes it an issue where, as much as you probably see your parents get into it with each other, because we never seen that, now we are in a stage of life where our first encounters are with people that we experience, and we're learning from everybody else instead of learning from the home. So we don't know how to interact with each other, or we don't know how to talk to each other because of we didn't have that foundation of that kind of discussion of them talking at home, if that makes sense.
Definitely makes a lot of sense. Another reason to stress why non-white people, particularly Black people, need a code, because if the code was being taught to our offspring and to the younger folks, they would know how to interact with people instead of getting like the kind of lessons I got, which is like, don't let nobody talk to you any kind of way. Somebody talk to you incorrectly, you just knock them out. You know, don't let nobody talk to you any kind of way, let nobody treat you any kind of way. This is not constructive advice. You know, the constructive advice should have been minimize contact, minimize conflict. You know, if you can't solve your problems by staying in the question lanes and coming up with solutions in a calm, courteous manner, then it's best to just get out of the situation. But in a lot of the times in non-white victim units, we are encouraged to, like, if you have a problem, yeah, you gotta fight. You know, you gotta be a man. Don't be a punk. You know, when 9 times out of 10, that fight will lead to more problems, whether it's being suspended multiple times from fighting at school, or whether it's you missing out on learning because you're suspended, or whether it's from you being seriously harmed because you were told to fight instead of minimize contact, minimize conflict. So a code is really important, especially a code that helps us to interact with one another, because we have been programmed so far away from how we should be interacting with one another that we need a code. And if we have access to the code, we need to be practicing it and sharing it, especially with our offspring. If we have decided to bring offspring to planet Earth, very important. So yeah, just like I definitely think it goes both ways, and it's not because you never seen your attempted parents argue. It's just because they have just never had the awareness to teach you how to deal with people in that manner, and that is very common amongst victim units. We are not taught many of the things that we should be taught, and we are taught plenty of things that we shouldn't be taught. And that's the system of white supremacy for you right there. I think this part of the book 161 is very telling, very telling. It states, disorders of extreme stress, not otherwise specified, DESNOS, or complex PTSD for short. We then eagerly anticipated the publication of the DSM. I think this is 4 or 5. I can't read Roman numerals. Oh well. And we then eagerly anticipated the publication of the DSM IV in May 1994, but much to our surprise, the diagnosis that our work group had overwhelmingly approved did not appear in the final product. None of us had been consulted. So earlier we learned that this DSM book is not even supposed to be like used that seriously. You know, it's more like a reference. But then some psychiatrists, psychologists have determined that the book is really lacking, and they use it as a resource in their medical fields nonetheless. So they attempt to add more clear definitions, you know, as to what they believe they're facing. But more powerful white people, it seems, did not allow this change to be added to the DSM. And I think this is a good indication, really telling of how white people, they know that non-white people are very, very, very traumatized by the system. And perhaps if there's more ways to pinpoint how non-white people are traumatized, they may be able to get some constructive help. But white people are totally against non-white people getting constructive help. So it makes sense why they wouldn't add more refined definitions to this DSM, because they don't want to risk non-white people getting the help that they need. So they will not update the DSM to serve non-white people's purpose. I mean, non-white people's help, but they will take out like homosexuality out of the DSM in order to get tons of non-white people to participate in that sort of behavior. It's very, very interesting, very, very telling of how the system of racism and white supremacy works. If it can, even if it can help white people as well, they will sacrifice their own to prevent non-white people from getting help, is what this also indicates. I suspect. Any comments? I can't be the only one who has notes from the text.
I wanted to ask a question to the folks listening. In the context of the book, but also keeping in mind racism, white supremacy, how important is it to address and deal with trauma versus creating like a more of a constructive plan for life? Because I personally feel like one could go to therapy and one could find restorative measures to quote unquote heal from trauma, but I also think there are other ways to kind of address trauma, and that's like not like, but it's an overcoming through, becoming more than what the trauma is attempting to make of you. Like, for example, 0526 said earlier, people can ascend to what their parents or attempted parents instill into them. And if you have a extremely traumatic life, then it's probably a fact that the things instilled into you will not allow you to shape in your mind a life that is one without constant suffering and constant negative activities that are for the most part only there because of racism or supremacy, but also because of learned behavior patterns or behavior patterns that have been instilled into the victim. So the question, again, to reiterate is healing essential to solving the problem? Or are there alternative means to staying on code?
I'd like to answer. I think healing is highly essential to the problem, just for the sake of being able to function enough to have, to be coherent enough to take on the issues of like racism, white supremacy. If you can't deal with your automatic behavior responses, anybody can control you. So for the sake of that, 100%. I'd say from my own experience of, I had previously experienced therapy, but you continue these things like in your own practice. You have to, as helpful as therapy is, there has to be a way in which you look at your life that becomes therapeutic. And I'm not saying it can't be biased or played or what's the word? Contaminated with low thoughts, but if you are serious and with intent, going taking that information or gratefully being on a path of where you always analyze psychology, you have to try and analyze yourself in that matter. And I'd say you find the more you address it, the more your body feels freer, unlocks more memories, and you become stronger in the sense that, well, for me, the more I addressed it, when you don't let it out, it can occur in some form of like a mental health breakdown. And the more you release, the more your brain becomes back to an equilibrium. And that's, I think, when the body has had enough. And the more you strengthen in talking about it and addressing it, the more you know what you want. So in my instance, I kind of refuse to be in the presence of that family member. And I've told my mom, and it took me being 29 so many years to be able to communicate that to her. And then she told me something she had never told anybody else, that she was abused as a child, and she's 50 something. So I was there observing my situation, but she's been holding it in for longer. But luckily from the teaching, her generation didn't get that. Like, what's psychology to them or depression? It's just something that was highly programmed as a part of their life. So that kind of just took a chip off me and allowed me to even understand that people have been dealing with it for longer. So maybe my emotional maturity was allowed to grow a bit more because of the fact that I addressed it. But I definitely know that somewhat of a Peter Pan mentality you develop, in the sense that you want to fulfill those parts of that childhood, is what I've observed and dealing with. But healing is highly essential to being able to function and achieve and thrive in society. Otherwise, you stay in a loop of confusion.
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
I think it's a very good question. One way of, I think we all have to deal with any mistreatment that we have experienced as in childhood. We're dealing with it consciously or unconsciously. And the benefit for me of this book club and times when I've been to therapy and so on is when I've been to good therapy is when I've had the opportunity to take a grasp of what happened, bring it to conscious awareness, and then to move on, heal myself and move on. But things that I have not been able to put a finger on, because it's like that interesting statement that was made last week, that the child needs to be seen by the mother or the caregiver in order to know that they exist, like that their feelings exist. They have to be seen. So in the same way, our caregiver has to see those parts of us and help us to accept and recognize those parts of us. And when that doesn't happen, we as adults can do that for ourselves, hopefully, and with more understanding and in a good environment, possibly can heal. Now, there's some therapy that's just worthless and just makes things worse. Just like there's some ways that caregivers teach you to handle your own emotions that are just not useful at all. So, for example, my father would say, and he did this just a week and a half ago, and I consciously realized that why it felt so wrong and why it was not, how that might have affected me. He said, we're talking about something, and I expressed a concern, and his response was, don't think about that, just forget about that. So complete dismissal. Why do you think that way? How does that make you feel? He's not able to, or he did not encourage me to explain my concern. He dismissed it out of hand. And I recognize that tone of voice and that phrase from childhood. I think the earliest memory I have of it is at 12 years old, when I was worried that I was leaving the school that I'd spent all my life in to go to the high school where I wouldn't know anyone. And I was sharing this deep concern that I hadn't mentioned to anyone to him. And he was like, forget about it, don't worry about it. So I don't want to forget about the things that I've gone through right now, because I feel like it's helping me to have more understanding of myself and of the system. Helps me be more sympathetic to other victims of racism. Helps me to understand the game plan and the gameplay of the white supremacists. I mean, like I said, just an hour or so earlier, I realized the connection. I always saw this diagram in the ISIS papers, and that's what really drew me to the book, how white supremacy destroys the family. That's why I was so interested in my work to begin with. But reading The Body Keeps Score and hearing how very extreme forms of childhood trauma lead to dependency, deprivation, disassociation, all of these terms, and some very good descriptions of what they mean and how they are expressed in people, helps me to recognize similar behavior in victims of racism and people that I know. And it doesn't mean that everybody have to have had the level of intensity of childhood trauma or the exact kind of, but But it helps to draw a line, a connection between what I experienced and what I'm seeing, to some research, and like you can see the red line between the mistreatment, the lack of mirroring, and how how it expresses itself in the child not being able to learn, play with other children, form good social bonds, trust people. You know, it helps. I feel like I'm getting a really good understanding of why some things that we do are not just about being kind. It's about helping you to function effectively as humans. Yeah. So your question was about, does it make sense to do therapy? Some therapy, stay far away from it. People, therapists who aren't concerned, therapists who aren't empowering you, therapists who aren't empowering you to understand how trauma works in the brain and what you as a patient can actually do about it. Like those therapists need to be stayed far, far away from. They just sit, take notes, and let you talk and think that that's going to help you. That's not enough. The therapist that says, like, hey, this is what you need to think about, or this is probably what you want to read, or this is probably what you have to do. That's good. And I think the best therapist is one's own self and close friends. Like a very good relationship with people that care about you can help heal. So, like 2 weeks ago, they talked about adolescent love being possible to help people have a good memory of connection and attunement. You don't have to fall in love, but you can have good friends, and they can help you have faith in humanity, and have faith in your own self and your own feelings. Yeah, so I think this book club, it's last week was a bit tough to hear the stories, but now I'm being able to listen and connect with it to Dr. Watson's work. Yeah, so some therapy good, some therapy bad. You have to make the decision. But in the end, we replace white supremacy with justice. That's it for me.
Thank you. Kweki Drama, then Nanaya.
Was that who went on just now? Was it Silent Warrior or was it Eaton, I believe? I just want to say that, yeah, I do definitely agree with his take on therapy. Going back to Sert's question, I believe he asked if recognizing trauma and going through therapy, if I'm correct. I think recognizing trauma is always the first step, just even like recognizing the problem, because then you can, figure out the solutions. I will say that a very interesting observation I've made lately is that the generation now is doing a relatively decent job at analyzing trauma. But I think but I think there's an issue with really comprehending the real problem at hand. Nowadays I see a lot of younger folk talking about their traumas and recognizing how their parents have put them through things, and they're able to recognize these things and work on these things through like therapy and other things. But I see a very common trend that a lot of them stop there with just their parents, you know, almost so much as blaming them and pointing the finger, you know, victimhood. So I think recognizing our trauma is very important. You know, I think going further than that, and kind of recognizing, you know, how that trauma was created or how it acted on us and how it's been passed down is very, very important. You know, we have, you know, I have some associates that I've seen that, you know, basically, you know, recognize their trauma, but bash their family unit, you know, not really understanding that just like you know, they didn't know any better, unfortunately. So to answer the question, I think it is very important to recognize the trauma, but I think it's also to be I don't know really how to put it into words, but, you know, become really focused on what the real issue is at hand rather than just leaving it at the surface level. I think that's all I have to say.
Thank you. And then just to add to that, I have so many thoughts on that question. Is healing necessary to produce justice? Or can we just follow the code? When I think of producing justice, I think of a lot of things happening simultaneously. When I think of healing, I also think of action. And oftentimes, like, there's this thing, thank you, Kwaku Dromo, who mentioned this idea of recognizing trauma. Like, it's one thing to recognize it, but you can't continuously recognize it and not like put forth action or intentions or some sort of thing to like overcome. It's almost you have to make a decision once you recognize it. Do I sit here and dwell in it, or do I take the time to attempt to overcome? And I think one of the things too, when I'm thinking about like this book, and also like the how it aligns with like producing justice, is like there must, like, if you want to produce justice, you almost have to take the step. The only route is to overcome or to take action, to, I don't want to say get out of your traumas or move forward, but I think it's almost like learning the different facets of your traumas, like how to deal with them, how to I don't want to say deal, but mainly like live, how to continue living with it, right? Because sometimes it doesn't ever go away, but you have to like choose every day to learn how to live with it. And I think that's very important, just because like even seeing over personal experience with like going to therapy, and also spending, I kid you not, so much time like wanting to just understand and putting so much effort into overcoming it, or just like living with it, as I mentioned before. So I think one of the things too is like experience I had over the weekend, and just realizing like how big this fight is to produce justice, you know, and the idea of like what is it, when you almost numb yourself in order to like not go through your traumas, or numbing yourself just for a period of, just for the specter of just having fun. Like, I think it's just one of those things I continuously kept thinking about over the weekend, is like, it's just very interesting how, like, not to get off topic, but how like producing justice is only like something we say, but not something we actually like show in our actions, because we're just like everyone else. Like, you know, I mean, we're all human. And it's almost like we want to put our fun in replace of the actions that's needed to produce justice. Very obviously, it's not an entire life thing. It's just like different aspects of like what we want to do. So like, for example, I went to a gathering over the weekend, and the only thing I continuously kept thinking about was I could be at home doing something else, right? And the reason why I had that thought, not because I didn't want to be there, but it's mainly just because like I'm really interested of like producing justice, but actually taking actions, like coming up with a solution. And I've been trying to come up with some strategies to actually do this and not just, oh, I'm just gonna produce justice. You know, I understand like the code, like that's something we're gonna have to do and continuously go back to throughout our entire life. Even with, I think following the code will help with trauma as well. If you start to analyze these things that you do, like, why do I want to have fun? Why do I want to do this behavior? Why do I do this behavior? Why do I do that behavior? And then ultimately try to change these behaviors in order to cleanse your mind and everything about you, just so you can open up space to produce justice. So I think it's just everything happens simultaneously. And I think it's very important to go through the steps of healing and actually heal to be able to live with it. I don't want to say overcome, but almost like not keep falling back into, but into be like the old ways or the numbing ways. But yeah, that was just some of the things I kept thinking about also like throughout the book. Today's reading is just like thinking of strategies and solutions instead of just saying, oh, I want to do this. I want to do this. It's like you can say all you want until you do it. So I think it's just like really attempting to try your entire best, like everything in you, your best to do it. Like if you want to overcome something or if you want to get through something, like do everything you can. I want to see you crawling if you need to, you know. So I think it's very important. I think it's important that we have this group, and I really love this group, that so we can lean on each other and really turn to each other when we are in those dire needs, or we need to say, hey, I need to leave this thing because of X, Y, and Z reason. I need to move forward. I can't read this because of this, this, and this. It brings back these memories, which is totally okay. Like if you are triggered in any way, you just have to step back and oh, sorry. Okay. You just have to step back in and say, and be honest with yourself too. Like if you can't be in a certain situation because it's like trauma triggering, then I think it's very like to say it out loud or to remove yourself from that situation. Thank you. Sorry, so much to say.
No need to apologize. Tracy, I see you have your mic unmuted. Did you want to answer the question?
What I was just saying about this, I've been hearing, and I've been following you guys for a while about the stress and all this. I've been through a lot my life when I was growing up and everything, but I didn't let it affect me. As far as I can tell, it didn't affect me in any way. Maybe it did, maybe someone else can tell, but as I look over my life or whatever, the things that happened to me in my past or whatever, that's my past. I had to learn how to get over it in order for my children to have well-adjusted, as well as can be in a society life. So I didn't let the things that happened to me hinder how I raised my children or how I treated others. And I'm listening to this guy and how they say that this happened to a person and this is the effect of that, or this happened to a person and this is the effect of that. All that it never happened to me. The presumptions with men and laying here and doing this, it never happened to me. That type of stuff that happened when I was younger, I learned how, okay, I was a victim. Now, Tracy, what are you going to do to get over that? And I did deal with that on my own, in my own way. And I think I adjusted well. I don't let that past really bother me. And so when I'm listening to this, I can understand, but I really can't understand how someone can let something that happened to them affect their whole entire life. That's just how I feel. That's all I have to say about that issue.
Can't just keep going on and on and on.
Thank you. For me to answer your question, Sir, so the word heal means to become sound or healthy again. I guess I gotta learn, look at the definition for healthy as well to see if under the system, if that's even possible. And good health. All right. So I think practicing counter racism is one of the best ways to to heal because we have been trained to be functionally insane. We currently do not have sound minds. Despite how correct thinking we have become, there's still a lot of poison in us due to what we're surrounded by. So I don't think one should focus on healing from their trauma. I think they should understand what it was and how it affected them and what they can do to prevent it from happening again, and perhaps prevent it from happening to other people. I don't think a person can fully heal in the system of racism and white supremacy. And I think the closest form of like therapy non-white people can practice every day is attempting to produce justice. And it's very simple from my perspective to work on producing justice every single day using your thoughts, speech, and action. Like for example, like I try not to use the word human anymore because on planet Earth there's only subhumans, people who have been victimized and mistreated. Actually, no, I'm not even gonna give my definition for subhuman. I'm gonna read the definition from the word guy of subhuman really quick. Okay, so producing justice is not gonna be some sort of magnificent event where it just happens automatically. It's gonna be a slow, hellish crawl to get to producing justice because lots of non-white people and white people are gonna have to possibly die for justice to be produced. And so as a powerless group, as a powerless people, we don't really have many ways of attempting to produce justice outside of using our thought, speech, and action. And if counter-war, counter-violence is the avenue one wants to take, then by all means, be the system's guest. But I believe it's much easier to make an impact while leading by being an example of the code and practicing the code with our thought, speech, and action, to not be ever confused about what's happening on planet Earth, and to never be confused to think that a white person is a human, or even a Black person is a human under the system of white supremacy. So from 330 of the word guide, subhuman, use this word to apply to all persons and creatures in the known universe. When others use the term subhuman, non-human, inhuman, inhumane, etc., ask for a detailed explanation that you can easily understand. Reason: according to compensatory logic, the people of the known universe are not human, not humane. They are other than human and or less than human. They are not human beings because they have proven to not be humane, because they do not interact with each other by using truth in a manner that would result in the production of justice and correctness, balance between people, creatures, things, etc. The white people of the known universe practice white supremacy racism, and or they allow white supremacy racism to be practiced. This alone disqualifies them from being correctly called human beings. They are beings, but not human beings. The victims of white supremacy racism, non-white people, are not human beings because those white people who practice white supremacy racism do not allow their victims to function as beings who are humane. So this is the counter-racist logic. If one is attempting to be on code, this is the kind of logic we have to implement and use when we are talking about the world in which we were born into, this prison world we are born into. So to answer the question, practicing a code is my form of healing. I don't see the importance of healing on a planet where there's still going to be many people mistreated and experiencing incorrect, vile treatment. So the best, it just doesn't make sense to heal while the chaos is still going on. It makes more sense to have how you're gonna correct the chaos be a form of healing in itself. And I think that is what the code has, what the code is. I may be incorrect, but to me, the code is definitely a form of healing, because I've definitely been able to improve my own mood, my own thinking, and change my thought, speech, and behavior. So I'm no longer confusing myself with things I say and things I believe. So if you'd like to repeat the question, Kweku's back, you may want to answer. I mean, sir.
Yeah, the question was, is healing, like, and when I say healing, I mean, seeking therapy or counsel to become a better person and to overcome trauma, is that essential to producing justice, or simply being on code and following the compensatory logic, is that enough to bring justice upon the earth?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to try and answer to the best of my ability. I'd like to think that the code is healing. Coming to terms with concepts that Black people, non-white people have been trained to be monsters and monstrosities. Realizing that and effectively trying to counter that, reprogram yourself. I think that is healing in itself, because you're working, as you come to terms with that, you're working on yourself. I don't believe that you can produce justice if there's a certain amount of toxicity, or people are practicing injustice. I don't think you can produce justice that way. I think in order to produce justice, you need, it definitely takes a certain kind of being. Maybe that's the universal man, universal woman that Neely Fuller talks about, but you can't do that until you've cleansed yourself, or attempted to cleanse yourself, attempted to heal the things that hold you back, that destroy you, etc. I hope that made sense. That was kind of short. I want to get to the point.
Well said, understood. And just a comment really briefly on what Miss Tracy shared earlier. Many victims of abuse, many victims of incorrect treatment do manage to be not as affected by the experience and can overcome that experience, but some victims are not as resilient as others. So it's really important to look at this situation as we're not looking at our own individual selves as so much, but we're looking at the entire non-white Black collective who evidence has shown that are not resilient to the effects of trauma. And the proof is that we are out here killing one another, producing genocidal music that celebrates us killing one another. And we are spending a lot of our time and energy putting cosmetics on our body and our body, which is an indication of a group of people who are not resilient to trauma and heavily motivated by the trauma that they experience. I'm gonna read, I think this is very telling as well, from 163. These in regards to adverse childhood experiences, which is just a euphemism for traumatized children and their experiences. You know how they like to put a band-aid on these sort of things. So the book says more than a quarter responded yes to the question, did one of your parents often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you? Did one of your parents often or very often hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? In other words, more than a quarter of the US population is likely to have been repeatedly physically abused as a child. To the questions, did an adult or a person at least 5 years older ever have you touch their body in a sexual way? Did an adult or a person at least 5 years older ever attempt oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? 28% of women and 16% of men responded affirmatively. 1 in 8 people responded positively to the questions. As a child, did you witness your mother sometimes, often, or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her? As a child, did you witness your mother sometimes, often, or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard? So, and these 3 bullets regarding the study of traumatized children, it says here that more than 25% of the people in this study were sexually abused by someone in there, but just by someone. More than a quarter of the US population, I suspect, I would say, just my logical guess, I would say it's more than half of the US population, because this sort of behavior is just so embedded in the culture of white supremacy, like hitting and corporal punishment of the sort. But it says here that a quarter of the US population experience physical childhood abuse, and 1 in 8 people have witnessed their mothers being abused by someone. So this is what the people of the planet are dealing with 24/7. It should be no wonder, no surprise that this is occurring under a system of white supremacy, which necessitates, I believe, all of the I just mentioned. This system requires children to be used as sex toys, as sex things. The system requires adults being able to buy children for whatever means that they want to use children for. They usually call this adoption, but a lot of white people will adopt a child for the purposes of sex, to rape that child. We are taught that spanking our children is not that bad. It's not that bad. But I suspect hitting children or neglecting them is one of the reasons why we have so many mass shootings occurring. White people have grow up in homes where there's like so much hostility and anger, and the absence of correct intentions and correct behaviors. So they eventually take out all that anger on people around them in the form of a mass shooting. When little boys are witnessing their, maybe when little boys and when little boys and little girls are witnessing their attempted parents get abused, this could reinforce a future wherein that little boy is going to be abusing his significant other, or perhaps that little girl may begin to hate men, to hate males, and may choose to participate in counter-sexual behaviors and a counter-sexual lifestyle, which is totally incorrect as well. Yeah, like we are really growing up in a very, very chaotic, vile environment. And I wonder how many non-white people are really aware of like what's happening on planet Earth. How many non-white people understand that they live in a system where child rape, child abuse, child murder is necessary in order for white people to keep being comfortable and to keep doing what they want to do, which is to maintain the system of white supremacy. I really wonder how many non-white people have this awareness and have came to the conclusion that it's not my problem. There's nothing I could do about it. I hope not many. It would be more correct for people to just not know what's going on than to know that all this is happening and to still choose to do nothing. It's really despicable system that we live in. Another interesting part of the text is on 164. It says,
Can I share something before you read that bit?
Yeah.
So earlier you had mentioned like a child parents, basically, parents who are still children in a way. So I've been seeing a lot of this on social media, like 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds being decorated by their attempted parents, and like gold chains, and like some of them have like grills in their mouth, and they're like filming their young babies, like rapping all along to like rap music where the rapper is talking about shooting black people, shooting niggas, and effing bees. So when I say bee, I mean like the B word. So I'm seeing this every single day, like and I find it interesting to not seek the information. It's always there. You go onto any social media platform, you can see how non-white people decorate their children. And there was this post circulating around, and this attempted parent had 2 sons who were no older than probably 9 years old. One was probably 5 or 4, and they have like fresh clothes on, gear, and the mother is saying, yes, I dress my boys like this on purpose. I want little girls to be chasing them around. I want them to have a lot of little girlfriends. And if you have a problem with that, you need to keep your kid in line. My boys can have as many girlfriends as they want. These are children. And I was like, this is very tragic that some parents have this rationale, and then there's a very popular meme now, but an actual video of a child, a murder song. I'm gonna call rap music that is about killing black people. I'm gonna just call it murder music now. So this baby, this non-white child, is listening to murder music, and I'm assuming someone gave him a toy gun, and he's just somehow this child has memorized this whole song, and he has a fake gun, and he's just imitating this murder music energy. The parent is encouraging it and filming it. So that is tragic arrangement that's going to be happening on this planet until racism, white supremacy is addressed, because it's going to just continue to retard the brains of non-white people and think that, and give them the notion that this is okay, like it's okay to behave this way. And I often question, as 0256 mentioned, are non-white people just not aware that they're being squashed? Because they have to be aware of the police murders, but has the brain trashing given them the feelings and the understanding that even though these Black people and these some brown people are being killed by race soldiers, that's not gonna happen to me. This wouldn't have happened if he didn't grab this, or didn't walk here, or she didn't say that, or she wasn't holding this. Have they gotten to the point where they rationalize every single execution of a non-white person in the name of white supremacy? Have they gotten to the point where they defend and rationalize white supremacy so they don't know that it exists? It's a lot of questions, not many answers, but I do suspect that the trauma is one of the reasons why folks are, just in this the state of retardation in a way.
Yeah, trauma often makes us repeat the same mistakes over and over, and I suspect that victim parent probably grew up in an environment where she saw males, or she experienced with many males who were very much into multiple sexual conquest. So she's instilling that into her offspring, which is just going to perpetuate this false idea that non-whites, particularly non-white Blacks, have about what it means to be a man. They think sexual conquest or having multiple girls in their lives is how you be a man. Well, that couldn't be farther from the truth. ISIS paper said it best. The only people worthy to call themselves a man are those who are outside, free of the system of white supremacy, are those who are doing their darnest to replace the system of white supremacy with justice. Kwaku?
Hi, I just wanted to share some of my notes. Sorry if you guys have already covered this, but specifically talking about child abuse, when the author mentioned that he said something, I could kind of paraphrasing, but he said something along the lines of child abuse is the most expensive issue in America. And I just, that was a very wow moment for me, because, I tend to think that health is the #1 issue in America, or the most expensive issue in America, the healthcare industrial complex, making so much money off of, I guess, poor judgment and being in mistreatment of the health priorities in this country. But it was like, wow. But obviously I'm not surprised under a system of racism, white supremacy, because there was a list of things he mentioned that like child abuse leads to. One of the things he said was incarceration, and we already know how much money white supremacy makes off of the greater confinement of non-white and Black males specifically, but the people as a whole. So it definitely was not surprising to hear that. But things like child abuse, sex trafficking, drug trafficking, etc., and the money that it generates, I don't know why it never occurred to me to put child abuse in that category. Such a vile and disgusting practice that is probably nowhere near getting the attention it deserves. And then he mentioned also that about children, I guess, qualifying for PTSD treatment. And he mentioned like how most children do not qualify for PTSD. And, oftentimes they are, I don't want to say misdiagnosed, but they're given like other alternatives rather than, like actually treating the PTSD, because the abuse that children go through, it should be categorized as PTSD. Hearing that, I suspect that the white supremacists once again are working overtime in order to avoid dealing with the actual problem of child abuse. Because I imagine once those children are actually given the opportunity to receive those kind of treatments, those therapies, that child abuse, and the view of child abuse will be brought to the forefront, that this is a national, international crisis that needs to be dealt with. I think that it goes a long way with keeping people misinformed about what the issues actually are. And then he mentioned developmental trauma disorder. When I thought about that, because I've worked with kids with autism before, so I've been in a lot of schools, a lot of the special education classrooms, even as a substitute teacher. And when he was naming the symptoms, like the masturbation, the chewing of the nails, pulling your hair out, etc., I've seen all of those with my eyes full and well. Kids just not being able to concentrate, not getting along with kids for no reason, just unable to get sorry, I know the reason, but at the time, these kids are not able to get along with anybody. They're pulling their hair out. They are having breakdowns from word triggering just one word, an entire breakdown. And a lot of times it gets chalked off to being like ED, like emotional. I can't remember what the D stands for. I just remembered it. Emotional. It's not distress disorder. Might help me out if they know it. ED. They have entire schools for kids who have been diagnosed with this. I can't. The D would help so much.
Is it deficiencies? I'm just guessing.
No, it's not deficiency.
Disorder?
It's not disorder either. Okay, I'll try to come back to it, but they have entire schools dedicated to just housing these kids that have been diagnosed with this. And pretty much, these kids go to these schools, and I suspect that, because I've talked to people who are emotionally distressed. Sorry, that's what it is, emotionally distressed. So these schools are built to house these children who are probably experiencing PTSD or from some sort of child abuse. And I don't believe that their symptoms or the causes are actually being they're actually trying to figure out what's going on with them. Rather, they've just developed these schools to house them, because these kids cannot be at normal schools because of their symptoms are so severe that they are fighting teachers, they are fighting staff members, they're just attacking and abusing everyone around them. Obviously through no fault of their own. But how even an institution can exist like that is a testament to the awesome power of racism, white supremacy. That rather than dealing with this, let's just create a building, keep these kids here, and we'll keep them here until they're of age, they go out, commit a crime, and then they're in the prison system. So because that's a lot of what that does. I mean, a lot of kids in special ed and special needs, special ed today, they're one step, two steps from being placed in those institutions. Like I said, I've witnessed this. A lot of these kids I suspect that they're going through some sort of abuse at home, at school, wherever it may be, but they're definitely experiencing some sort of abuse in their life, and it's not being dealt with in an efficient, constructive manner. Therefore, I think that's what was leading to this crisis that we have. That's it for my notes.
Thank you. That was Black excellent. Really unfortunate that is the reality of your past situation. Do you think that the children there responded to your presence constructively or non-constructively?
In the special needs classes?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess it's kind of two different experiences, because working with the kid with autism in the school, I'm his aide, so I'm just there to manage his behaviors and ensure that he's not like disrupting the classroom. So you have to build some type of rapport with the child, make sure that he is which isn't always easy, because oftentimes these kids don't trust like anybody. They don't trust their parents. They don't trust like most people. They can take to a liking to you, but there's always these kind of guidelines that you have to follow that kind of inhibits the rapport. Certain things like I don't want to just start saying things, but really things that prevent you from building a constructive relationship with the child, because the focus should be on not disrupting the classroom with them. In terms of when I was subbing, that was that's tough, because substitute teachers don't get treated the best in general. So sometimes when you're going to a special needs classroom, the kids don't really pay much attention to you or even respect you. So I don't know, I guess not really. I don't think I had a constructive influence on the kids as much as I would have liked to.
Thank you. A lot of what you said reminded me of this part from the text on 166 that states, but when the ACE study data started to appear on his computer screen, he realized that they had stumbled upon the gravest and most costly public health issue in the United States, child abuse. He had calculated that its overall cost exceeded those of cancer or heart disease, and that eradicating child abuse in America would reduce the overall rate of depression by more than half, alcoholism by 2/3, and suicide, IV drug use, and domestic violence by 3/4. It would also have a dramatic effect on the workplace performance and vastly decrease the need for incarceration. So this is why the people who conducted the study, their input was totally ignored by the DSM folks, because white supremacy cannot allow child abuse to be eradicated, because it's such an integral part to how the system is works. This is insane that countering child abuse could do so many constructive and positive things to for society, but white people will not allow that. And the first part of this, he says Robert Anda could not hold back his tears when he was divulging the results of his studies. And I'm like, could this be an example of a white person truly trying to help people, and other white people are preventing him from doing that? Reminded me of Neely Fuller, how he says like some white people like really try to help, and some of them may even get even teary-eyed about the situation, but the most powerful white people will definitely put an end to their attempts of producing constructive results, especially if it will impact non-white people. Like anything to diminish incarceration rates, I suspect, in a system of white supremacy, it will not be allowed, because they need non-white people in jail. And also improving the workplace environment, they also need non-white people in the workplace acting silly and being able to be easily fired, are able to be easily manipulated, and to be okay with being paid less than their white counterparts. So it is really tragic that the answers to these problems exist. They have been stated by other white people, but the most powerful white people do not have the will to improve things for the folks on planet Earth, do not have the will to produce justice. No matter how constructive it would be to have a system of justice instead of the system of race and white supremacy we currently live in. I really like this quote from 160, actually, yeah, from chapter 10. I may be, I don't know if it's 168, but my PDF says 168. But it says research on the effects of early maltreatment tells a different story. That early maltreatment has enduring negative effects on brain development. Our brains are sculpted by our early experiences. Maltreatment is a chisel that shapes a brain to contend with strife, but at the cost, enduring wounds. Childhood abuse isn't something you get over. It is an evil that we must acknowledge and confront if we aim to do anything about the unchecked cycle of violence in this country. Really, really significant quote, because I agree, like unless we address the evils of white supremacy, the madness, the abhorrentness of this system, we're gonna keep being traumatized, victimized, used and abused and slaughtered in huge numbers, especially with white people being more concerned about non-white people's population growth. So they would do anything to retard our children and retard us and slaughter us. But really important from this quote is that the part that has that says maltreatment has an enduring negative effects on the brain development. And this is probably why non-white people spend their life, you know, looking in the mirror, putting on their lip gloss, their eyelashes, trying to be cute, and then have a offspring and teach them how to do the same thing. Just be cute, look pretty for people. And it's just really tragic that mistreatment leads to so many forms of so many different patterns of behavior, many of them incorrect, silly and stupid and pitiful, but the cause of it is always trauma. You know, some people spend their time watching TV, playing tons of video games, watching tons of movies, but all of it, I suspect, is to distract from the system of racism and white supremacy, to distract from the many incorrect feelings we may have regarding our experiences in this system, or because we just genuinely think that this is something that we should be doing because we have not discovered our purpose on the planet, which is to produce justice. We're not on this planet to be cute. We're not on this planet to be Cardi B's and Meg Stallions or Lil Wayne's. We're on this planet to do something very serious, which is to produce justice, something that has never been done before. So
yeah, I want to comment. I agree with a lot of the points he said. You know, but most, if not all. You know, I think one thing that this chapter definitely highlights is, you know, this book is making it painfully obvious that the usual suspects have figured out just exactly how to destroy us. Great thinkers, problem solvers before us, such as Amos Wilson, have also identified the problem is with the children. I think we as Black people, as non-white people, are falling too much for the comfortability, the idea of taking care of ourselves or doing what we want. As adults, thinking that when we provide material possessions to our children, that's enough, that I provide them with housing, that's all that they need, and they'll be good. You know, it's a very toxic cycle that we continue to see. Just like, for example, you know, you're at a party, one of the people has children at the party, their kids are at the party. The children want the mother's attention. She's not giving them the attention because she's too preoccupied with getting male attention. At the same time, you know, you're saying you're not as important to me as this male stranger is. You know, which can be very traumatizing to the kids. You know, seeing their parent intoxicated, not having any kind of judgment, not deeming them as valuable. Those are all things that we're witnessing so much of. I think, you know, when you talk about the Cardi B's and the Meg Thee Stallions, you know, your children are watching you. Your children are watching you. They see you. They see you engaging in the unconstructive activities. And a lot of times that can be traumatic for the kids, because, you know, the woman might be getting abused, she might be getting taken advantage of. You know, you've never seen, you may have not ever seen your parent like that, you know. So, and it just continues to go on. White supremacists continue to create these situations, and we as Black people are just, you know, I would like to think we're becoming more aware of it, but I don't think so. I think it's getting worse.
Agree. Dire. We have been in a time of crisis for a very long time now. Your story reminds me of Anthony from the book. Anthony, remember, it was a 2-year-old. He was believe he was only 2.5 when he was referred to a trauma center. What the hell is a 2-year-old being referred to a trauma center for? Oh, but, you know, is a question I would ask myself if I didn't understand the system of white supremacy racism and what it does to people. But Anthony is a victim of seems to be like child neglect and child abuse. His mother is the epitome of poor mothers and just incorrect mothers who don't seem to care when he is exhibiting like patterns from a that a traumatized person does. She responds like, actually, I'm going to be more clear. So in a part of the book, he mentions that the mother pushed him away, and then he starts banging his head, self-harming. And she says, he just does that to bug me. These are the kind of parents, I believe we have more kind of parents like these than we have of correct functioning parents who are teaching their children the truth and teaching them that they're here to produce justice. Unfortunately, we have more parents like this one than we do of correct parents, unfortunately. And it's stated in the book 169 in the PDF. If Anthony were admitted to a hospital, he will likely be diagnosed with a host of different psychiatric disorders: depression, oppositional defiant disorder, anxiety, reactive attachment disorder, ADHD, PTSD. None of these diagnoses, however, would clarify what was wrong with Anthony, that he was scared to death and fighting for his life, and he did not trust that his mother could help him. And I believe this is a situation for many children. They're born into this world where the adults don't seem to care that much about them. They're often spending their time doing other things, not tending to the child. And then the child's brain computer thinks like, well, hey, why did you even bring me into this planet if you're just going to spend your time in front of that mirror with your makeup and those weaves? Or why are you going to spend your time playing Madden or 2K instead of teaching me something? So the offspring then develops a host of incorrect patterns of behaviors that are then given labels that will follow him throughout the rest of his life, all without ever receiving the constructive help that they need. Because Anthony and his mom need constructive help. She needs to be told that this is not the correct way to so-called raise a child. And Anthony just needs to be met with patience and kindness and a person who actually cares about their well-being. But in a system of white supremacy, if you're trained not to even care about yourself, love yourself, whatever that means, respect yourself, then how can you even tend to a child? It's literally impossible. Which is why we can have which is why we have the reality of like non-white parents having like 8-7 kids and expecting all those kids to turn out fine when you don't even have the time and energy to make sure that they will turn out fine, let alone you're not even teaching them what they need to know in this world. So we really, it just makes me think that we really have been made forever children. We think like children. We think very much childlike. We really have been convinced that we could live in this fantasy or well, like make a happy family. But when the kids start popping out and we start getting annoyed by the child's need for attention, the child's need for caring, that becomes yelling at the child, hitting the child, and then the cycle is continued because that child will grow up to be another victim who brings in more victims, possibly not knowing what the heck to do on this planet dominated by white people who practice white supremacy. At least in the homes of racist suspects, yes, the children are still being abused and mistreated, but at least they're being taught their racist code. They're being taught how to be racist white supremacists along with their abuse. But in the homes of non-white children, non-white victims, we are just being taught to be, I want to say mindless victims, because we don't even know that we're victims. We don't get that language, if ever, until later in our lives. Or so yeah, really tragic situations that we're living in, really incorrect. Understanding is key, I suppose, to solving this problem. And I think it's really interesting how we have a lot of similarities. Well, how our behavior can definitely be compared and contrasted with when I say we, I mean people. I'm not talking about Black people, but how they were doing the studies on the monkeys, and how the monkeys with poor parents grew up to be monkeys with anger issues, monkeys who will lash out at other monkeys, and monkeys with poor emotional regulation. So white people are well in the know of how adverse childhood experiences even affects other animals. So there can be no confusion as to what's happening in the homes of victims. Then again, this is a very sophisticated plan that they have created, and they want us to be born into these victim units where there will be no constructive results at all, except for the white supremacists. I'm just gonna read from 172 a little bit. It says, Sumi identified 2 personality types that consistently ran into trouble. Uptight anxious monkeys who became fearful, withdrawn, and depressed, even in situations where other monkeys will play and explore. Highly aggressive monkeys who make so much trouble that they are often shunned, beaten up, or killed. Both types are biologically different from their peers. Abnormalities in arousal levels, stress hormones, and metabolism of brain chemicals like serotonin can be detected within the first few weeks of life, and neither their biology nor their behavior tends to change as they mature. So the beginning of this study, they're trying to distinguish how certain parents of monkeys, how they can affect their biology, their brain, and it was determined that if a monkey is like raised by incorrect parenting, then as just because they're getting older doesn't mean that they're gonna mature and get over their negative experiences. They're gonna literally stay the same forever, which is an indication that childhood trauma literally like retards the brain, and you will definitely stay the same in your thinking and your behavior if the childhood trauma is that severe and you don't have any ways of mending it or any ways of correcting what has happened to you. So this again can explain the reality of non-white people, a bunch of victims who have been made children by the system and who seem to be stuck in this childlike state forever. Because why else would a grown person continue to play dress up, continue to curate the outfits that they're going to wear throughout the week, continue to participate in that sort of behavior? And it has to be because something has happened to us that is preventing us from maturing. Go on Instagram, you see all the Black females and Black males who are simply only concerned about how they look. This is something we should grow out of in middle school. But it's not. This is the behavior of adults, of so-called adults. And this is because the trauma we've experienced, the trauma of racism and white supremacy, knew the sort of people it would be producing, and it is really, really satisfied with the results, because a person playing dress up is not a person who's going to be a threat to the system of white supremacy. A person playing dress up, a child, I should say a child, is very rarely that people take children seriously. So why white people really have nothing to fear if they have produced millions of non-white people who are not serious, silly individuals, unfortunately. Yeah, and this is just making me more realize that white people cannot be confused about racism. They even understand how white supremacy affects monkeys. So they definitely understand what they're doing. This is a 1,000-year plus effort to keep us in this state of childlike stupidity. Anyone knows to share? If not, we can get to closing comments. Okay, gonna end early today because I don't want to be the only one speaking. I have more notes to share, but I don't care to share them with this participation that we're having. So we're gonna get into closing comments. Very, very constructive, very tragic to be diving into this. Yeah, very, very tragic. That's my closing comments.
My closing comments are, I suspect that this is gonna get, like, the stories that we discover in the book are gonna get more and more tragic, and to be expected in the system of racism, white supremacy. I'm also interested to like hear more from the writer, because I do suspect that he's withholding and also an agent of white supremacy.
For my closing comment, I dropped a link in the chat. It is about sex, life, and slavery. That's the name of the title of the video. But I put it in there to kind of show the child abuse that's been going on for centuries, and really how that has gone on for generations, and kind of has molded and created behaviors that we see today, especially within Black people. So urge you to check that out to kind of get an understanding of the really toxic, how long ago these practices have been in place, and exactly how they are being exhibited today. I believe that that's why child abuse continues to go on, because of practices like that. I've started to come to understand that these behaviors, these totally negative, destructive behaviors, are by far a large product of slavery. So really understanding those behaviors, we can work to reprogram, decondition ourselves, and protect the children by God. Protect the children at all costs. Children do not have enough advocates. They don't have any kind of protection, really, especially when their parents or their attempted parents are, the line between that is like they're only authority figures, I guess you could say. Parents or older people, they can call the police, they can go ahead and hit up the police, do whatever they want. They know the resources, they have them. Kids don't have any knowledge of this. They only know that their parents control and do everything for them. So I think we as Black people need to start really educating, really pushing this counter racism, and whichever language people need to hear it in, because this is disgusting, tragic, trashy, terroristic behavior going on the planet. And I think this is one of the reasons why I practice counter racism, is because there are people out in the world who, if they had the opportunity, they would be doing something about it. I think about the people who are constantly being bombed, don't have any time to think. If they had an opportunity, I'm sure they would be advocating for justice. So that's why I do that. So advocate for justice for these children. They need it.
That's beautiful. For my closing comments, I would say to anybody who, speaking on the topic of childhood traumas, to anybody who is listening, who is here, who has like experienced these things and has never spoken about it, I would say it's 100% important to seek therapy. It's 100% important to address the person who you believe is your care guardian or giver, on for the sake of your own betterment, for your own future ability to be able to provide for your child, and understanding why you feel that you wasn't protected will definitely protect things in yourself, and also teach you something about human nature, so you understand, because it's very easy to just think that your parent is like your soul, 100% soul protector, but we're supposed to experience certain things on this earth, and of course you're not meant to take any of it, but in addressing it with them, no matter what the outcome is, you provide some form of healing in yourself, and it relieves some part of the body. And the most I could say, information like this is extremely helpful. I wish the information was coming from a melanated perspective, but nonetheless, we read around it and we take the information that we can from it, and that it's been constructive to emotionally and through analysis go through some of the ways in which other people have handled trauma or heal from trauma or have operated out of trauma. Yeah. And I continue to heal and observe that and do what I can to make that into constructive information and into the work that I do for the future generations who have experienced abuse.
I'd like to go next, if that's okay.
Please do.
This book club is quite useful for me. I'm really grateful that this book was chosen, that I wouldn't have read it. I wouldn't have known about it if not for this book club. And I feel like I get much more than I thought when I first began to read it. Like I said a couple of weeks ago, I feel like we are seeing essentially the chessboard that we are looking at as counter-racist. What we're reading about in the book are essentially the moves that white supremacy makes to create functional inferiors of Black and other non-white people by destroying their family, destroying our families. So basic counter-racist strategy is to shore up and to do what we can to make and build strong families, strong survival units, so that we are humans and we're social. We're made to be social. Our mammalian brain, we're trained to be social. So the key is to make our social engagement be constructive, to have that as a focus. So that's what this book is driving home. Thank you.
Thanks for the check-in. So the closing comments so far. Miss Carice, Miss Tracy, would you like to share closing comment? Alrighty, thank you everyone for the really, really interesting discussion. I will see everyone next week. Gonna end the